Shalom, shalom. Hope everyone's having a wonderful day today. Excited to learn with you the Sefer HaChinuch. Continue our Mitzvot learning. As always, if you have questions or thoughts, feel free to post them here just below. So we've already looked at Mitzvah 51. Mitzvah 51 was about damages caused by domestic animals. And today we're going to look at Mitzvot 53, 55, and 56. And here we're looking at a range of jurisprudential issues, what in secular law we would generally call torts. And these laws emerge throughout the Bible, throughout the Torah. And there's a whole Mishnah order, a whole order of Mishnayot called Nezikin, coming from Nezek, which has to do with damages. We normally think of religious life to be about prayer and ritual and dogma and belief. But in fact, a huge part of Jewish life as religious principle and law is based around monetary issues, in particular around damage. That there may be times where there are legal responsibilities that we have for damages, and there may be other times where we think about moral responsibility, which is distinct from a legal responsibility. And so today we are going to look at some of the particular legal issues, but we should keep in mind this important moral dimension, since this is ultimately about the lives we live and the care we take in our lives. And so we might think that when we are not fully responsible, that we are exempt. But in fact, a lot of things that happen unintentionally is where the moral battlefield really plays out. Did we live a morally cautious life where we took care to avoid damage? And here there's various midot involved. Controlling one's anger, because anger can lead to damage. Having seder, having order in one's life. And basically, structuring one's life in a cautious way that avoids harm towards others. We have a principle called harchakat nezikin, which essentially means avoiding activities which may lead towards damage, that we should exercise caution to avoid damaging others. And so part of the answer is, what do we do once damage has happened? But the other issue here is, how do we live a life where we avoid causing damage as much as possible? I'm just fixing my computer screen here, and we're ready to roll. Okay, very good. Okay, so let's start with Mitzvah 53. Mitzvah 53 in the Sefer Chinuch said, Mitzvat Beitz Din Ladun Benezike Habor, that the obligation of the court to judge damages by a pit, right? And this is learned from Exodus chapter 21, verse 33, where it says, V'chi yiftach ishbor, essentially, and if a person shall open a pit. And so here we learn that something that is stationary, something on our property that's not moving, itself can be something that we're responsible for. This idea of a bore. And sometimes it may even be a pit that we ourselves didn't dig, but a pit that naturally emerges in various ways. Today we talk a lot about swimming pools and the obligation, even if someone walks into one's backyard, if there's not a fence or other cautions taken, what's our responsibility there? Okay, so that's 53. And then if we look over here at 55, Mitzvat Beitz Din Ladun Benezike Hever, the obligation for the court to judge damages by a domestic animal's grazing or trampling. Right? This is compared to 53, which is about a pit, and 51, which was domestic animals. Here we're dealing with domestic animals grazing or trampling in particular. So here we're dealing with our property that has motion to it. If you look at Exodus chapter 22, verse 4, Ki yaver ish, if a person's yaver, meaning causes grazing in a field, right, that we damage another's property. And then we have Mitzvah 56. Mitzvah 56, Mitzvat Beitz Din, Ladun Benezike Ha'esh, right? The obligation of the court to judge damage by fire, another form of traveling damage. Here we can look at issues around guns, around fireworks, around smoke that may be caused from our own fire pits. It says in Exodus chapter 22, verse 5, Ki teitze eish, if a fire breaks out. So we learn of these various forms of damage, and how they apply in modernity is very complicated. And we learn in Bava Kama 26b that one is liable for damages in Jewish law, even if accidental, even if unintentional. Some say even if there's an onus, right? There's uncontrollable actions beyond one's control. Nonetheless, when we own things and when we own more things, more responsibility comes with them, even when things happen that weren't intended by us. Certainly the case when we have children. If children cause damage, there's an argument about to what extent is a child obligated, but generally minors are either not obligated or have a lower obligation, and parents are responsible, essentially, for their minors. If you look at Choshen Mishpat 378.1, we learn that it is forbidden to cause damage. This doesn't mean that it's permitted to cause damage, but if you do, there is an obligation. But actually, there's a religious prohibition against causing damage. Just as one can't steal something, engage in an act of theft, under the circumstance that they're going to pay back someone for what they stole, so too, one can't cause damage knowing that they're going to replace that damage. I'm going to cut a hole into my neighbor's fence because in this moment I need to get through. It's okay because I'm going to pay them back for that damage. Rather, damage itself is forbidden. Choshen Mishpat 378, number 1. Now, there is a category of damaging another's property, which we'll call Adam Hamazik, or the idea of damaging another person, right, their body, of Chovel. Right, and we have these various different categories, and this is true whether we do it directly or whether it happens through one's property. And once we get to property and indirect damage, things become more complicated, as we're going to see. There's a concept called grama, of indirect damage, which in generally we're going to say that although it's forbidden to indirectly cause damage or loss to another, generally speaking, a court can't simply rule that compensation is owed in cases of indirect damage. However, we have an issue called garmi. Garmi is where loss is more clear. It's indirect, but more direct and more immediate. And over here, that there's an issue where the court, the Beit Din, wants to rule in the favor of the one who experiences a loss, lest individuals are constantly inflicting others with damage because of the claim that it's indirect. And this is not the kind of society we want to live in. If you look at the Ramah in Choshen Mishpat 386.3, who quotes the Ritzpah, we're going to see here we're dealing with common cases of indirect damages, cases where damage is quite common. So in these laws of torts, we're going to oftentimes talk about nominal damages, where we basically rule in favor of payment being made only in the sense of showing who is right. Right? We're going to demand some kind of payment merely to demonstrate who was right and who was wrong in the case. Then there's compensatory damages, where we want to actually correct the wrong. We want to compensate the one who had a loss based upon their loss. And then there can be punitive damages, where we look beyond the losses in punitive damages towards an actual form of punishment. Now, there's a whole complexity around damages in Jewish law, damages in secular law, how to evaluate them, how to calculate them. Very, very complicated. But in Jewish law, if you look at the Mishnah in Bava Kama 8, chapter 8, Mishnah 1, we see that there's 5 grounds for damages in halakha, in Jewish law. We have nezek, we have tsar, ripui, shevet, and boshet, right? That one who hurts another is obligated to pay on these 5 grounds. On the grounds of damage, on the grounds of pain, right? That's nezek. The grounds of pain, that's called tsar. Then there's the healing, the cost to heal, ripui. And then we have unemployment, the lost wages one has for their time out. That's called shevet, like Shabbat, right? That one is sitting, they're resting, they're not able to work. And then boshet, humiliation that may be caused. here as well. So based upon this chovel, based upon this damage, one is chayav on these 5 grounds. And many people today bring their cases into secular court, but the Beit Din, the Jewish court, is still designed to adjudicate such cases. And of course, there's a value always for pshara, for compromise, rather than merely strict justice. That we want to resolve conflicts in society. Now, if you look at the Rambam, Maimonides in Hilchot Teshuvah, chapter 2, halacha 9, the Rambam says, but in transgressions between a person and their fellow, such as one who causes bodily harm or who curses another or steals from them, and anything similar to these things, they're never pardoned until they give what is owed and appease their fellow, right? They have to compensate for this loss, and they have to appease them. Even if they repay what is damaged, the wrongdoer needs to appease them and ask for pardon from them. Even if he only verbally insulted him, he needs to appease him and approach him until he's forgiven. So here we see that Jewishly, we're not just concerned with the losses that are accrued, but we are concerned with a society of trust, societal peace. And one of the things that happens with damage is one feels more vulnerable. One feels more at risk in the world. It leads them towards more caution and less joy in many ways because they feel less safe in the world. And appeasing them and healing relationships helps to ensure that that damage is not lasting in other ways, and that we build a more moral society. This is very different from how we think of damages in a secular sense, where we often merely think about the obligations, but not of healing relationships and building societal trust necessarily. Then if you look at Rambam Hilchot Chovel Umazik, chapter 5, halacha 9, says one who damages their fellow's property is not similar to one who causes injury to the person themselves. The one who causes property damage is atoned for once he simply pays what he owes. Okay, so that's the category that we saw in secular law. However, one who causes property damage, however, one who causes injury to another person, the person themselves, even though they pay compensation, he is not atoned for, even if he gives all the money in the world. The wrongdoing is not pardoned until he requests forgiveness from the victim, and the victim forgives him. So here we see the case, once again, for the importance of the relationship, and if one goes to court after the case is ruled, to also offer an apology, even if one still feels they're not necessarily wrong. All the more so true when there's already a relationship in place. Now we get to the issue of complicated societal issues of where damage is unclear. Now today we've been talking a lot about self-driving cars for many reasons, and partially because yesterday, in the state that I happen to live in, the first recorded death by a self-driving car was reported. And the moral question emerges. Do we want people driving cars where there's clear moral accountability when there's damage, or more clear, we should say, or do we want computer-programmed cars where there might be less clear accountability? Now, on the one hand, one would argue, of course we want self-driving cars. There's estimations that this will reduce road deaths by 90%. Some have estimated that over the course of a decade, we may save 300,000 lives in America. The normal driver may be drunk, they may be on the phone, they may be texting, they may be distracted, they may be talking with a child in the back seat, they may simply be tired. And the number of road deaths and other forms of damage are a great tragedy. And just like we were nervous of going from horses to cars, we should grow up. We should grow up and understand that this is progress, technological progress, which is going to reduce death. Now, that is one response. That's a utilitarian response, which says our main issue here is reducing deaths. Other counter arguments emerge, where some are concerned about liberties. For example, if there are now systems that control our car, and some think this is a joke, but some think this is a real possibility, could the government or could corporations be controlling the roads, essentially? Who could get control of that in a way that could cause irreparable damage and a loss of liberties? Some think that's a ridiculous argument, and some feel there's a real concern that once the drivers lose their own autonomy for the cars they're in, they lose the right to making moral choices. They lose the rights to controlling their own destiny. And there's always the potential, of course, that a human would, in rare circumstances, make a better choice than a programmed car. Now, we can think about other moral dilemmas that have emerged. And here we can bring in the trolley dilemma. The trolley dilemma is very complex, and it would take a few hours for us to explain it and properly wrestle through it. But let's give a very simple example where a trolley is going straight, and if it continues to go straight, it will kill 5 people. But if the conductor makes a change, and it will only kill 1 person. So on the one hand, if it kills 5, the conductor, one might claim, is not morally responsible because they didn't change the course of the trolley, right? On the other hand, one might say, if they swerve the path towards the 1, then now they are morally responsible because they actively are killing that 1. They're choosing the 1 over the 5 as opposed to passively going forward. The other argument says they can intervene, and by staying on this path where 5 are killed instead of intervening and moving it towards 1, they have now taken 4 extra lives. And so this might emerge here as well, that how will a self-driving car be determined as to which way to swerve in the case of a clear accident and there is a second or less to make a decision. This may also emerge, some ethicists say, in regards to issues of age and gender and race. What happens if the car detects that going straight will hit 5 black men, but swerving right will hit 5 white women, where the numbers are the same, but there's other factors? Will cars eventually have to be programmed to make decisions which we might find abhorrent, the type of decision that is ultimately made, or one where it's morally arbitrary as to which decision to make? So this is quite difficult, and in the laws of damage, we can also ask who is accountable for the damage that is ultimately caused. If there is a self-driving car, will we claim that the company that programmed it is responsible for the damage? Is the government responsible? Is the driver in the car of the programmed car responsible? Will some claim that now a pedestrian or the car who was hit is now responsible because the car is programmed in a way that avoids all negligence and essentially puts all obligation now upon the one who was hit because of the perfection of the system, so to speak? This types of issue will also emerge around the Gulf oil spill. When there was an oil spill, who was responsible? The various companies involved, the government rights that are given, the citizens who are involved. So this gets quite complicated. I'm reminded of the sugya of the section in Bava Metzia 62a, where there are limited resources and a moral dilemma, which resonates as well. Shnayim shahayu mahalchim mederech. There are 2 traveling on a journey, far away from civilization, and one has a canteen of water. If they both drink the water, they will both die. But if one drinks, he can reach civilization. Now, of course, as modern people, we want to break the rules and change the dilemma here to say, change the options here. Does it really have to be that one drinks or both drink? So the son of Petura, Ben Petura, taught it is better that both should drink and die. Both should drink and die. We might think, why can't they both drink and then hopefully they'll live, right? Hopefully they'll make it there. But the dilemma, as restrained within these moral confines, these hypothetical confines, are either they both drink and die, or one drinks and one lives and one dies. Ben Petura says they both should drink and die, rather than one should witness the death of another, which would be a horrific moral choice for Ben Petura. Until Rabbi Akiva came and taught that thy brother may live with you. Your life takes precedence over their life. It's true of an obligation to save others, but our first obligation is to save ourselves. So here we see the case of a moral dilemma of self versus other, and who our obligation is when there are limited resources. And so too, we see that there is death on the road caused by these cars, and we have to make difficult choices around moral agency and around liberty and around reducing death and suffering in society. Our goal today is not to resolve this dilemma, but hopefully to add more texture and thoughtfulness to the debate. If one is purely a utilitarian, the answer is clear. If one's clearly a deontologist or a virtue ethics, embraces virtue ethics, the answer might be different. And according to Jewish law, there's other texture as well. As we can see, the laws of damages, the laws of torts are quite complicated in Jewish law. But I think we can pause here, and I hope folks will raise questions or thoughts or dilemmas so we can explore those in future sessions. And I leave us just with the thought that a major part of Jewish life is not merely about holidays or ritual or belief, but about how we think about the damages we cause through speech, through property, direct damages and indirect damages towards body and towards property. All of us do this. Sometimes we structure society in a way through insurances and the like, or lack of accountability. We scrape cars and drive away, where we can get away with a lot of things. But the moral life, as inspired by Jewish ethics, goes beyond what we are legally responsible for. And we should think of as being religious people, as being Jewish people, as thinking very deeply about damages that are caused in various forms and in many ways more complex in our new era of technology and internet, where damage through speech and through sight and through property and to body are more prevalent than we can imagine. I give us all the bracha that we can continue to study these laws together, continue to be more thoughtful about how to reduce damages and how to properly assign accountability. Have a great day.